Hello and welcome to Tokenverse podcast series, where we interview the most inspiring and influential minds to discuss the future of Web3 technologies and the most disruptive fields, including the world of arts, gaming, governance, and economics. We are here to lead you through this paradigm shift by exploring the most groundbreaking trends and cutting-edge solutions. This production is brought to you by Doing Good, an online NFT marketplace, which is empowering creators and brings people around the world who want to do good. And our guest today is Scott Austin Key, the CEO of Every Shelter, which is a non-profit organization which is creating sustainable shelters and jobs for refugees. My name is Ania Poullain-Majchrzak. I'm a journalist and film producer. I would like to welcome everyone to this session. And hello, Scott, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. So firstly, before we start talking about your exciting project, could you tell us what was your journey? What brought you to the place where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, you know, my journey starts with the design education. What turned into our nonprofit Every Shelter started when I was in grad school. I was getting a master's of architecture from Rice University. And we felt really compelled to use design to assist refugees who are living in shelter settings. And I know that's kind of a common conviction among designers, especially architects. You know, we knew at the time that refugees were spending decades living in effectively what amounted to a tent. And we wanted to be a part of solving some of those problems that those families experienced. And we started with a floor. So that was back in 2012. So this is my personal journey. Every Shelter is about 3 years old. We founded really in about 2019. But my story starts in 2012, 2013 as a student. And we really just wanted to tackle one thing. Millions of refugees were living directly in the dirt. From a design perspective, that felt like an omission. If you think about a home, you know, it's walls, it's roof, and it's a floor. And so we really set out as students to just solve one problem. And I'll say it was naive, our journey. We thought we could just solve it from a design perspective. And it really turns out that we needed to kind of solve some of the systems behind shelters for refugees. And that's really what led to Every Shelter. But as students, we created a prototype. We caught a big break when IKEA, who was developing a refugee shelter, invited us to test our floor with them in Sweden. And that was really a propelling moment for us as students. We ended up landing a grant with USAID that took us to Iraq and ultimately Lebanon, where we started working with refugee families to refine our prototype floor into what it became today. And the thing that we heard from refugee families was, yeah, of course we want a floor. That's obvious. But in the context where we were working around the Syrian conflict, most of the families that we were talking to were expressing a need to be warm in the wintertime. You know, they were living directly on the ground in the wintertime, and in many of those contexts, it freezes in the wintertime. And so we completely redesigned the floor to be an insulated floor. If you think about being cold, a lot of us, especially in our context, we just think about the air being cold. But when you're laying directly on the dirt, you know that there's two ways that you lose heat. It's because the air is cold, but it's also because you're laying on the freezing ground. And so working with these families, we completely redesigned our initial product to be an insulated floor. And so that's called Emergency Floor. We used our USAID funding to invest in a production mold. We started working with about 40 families in Lebanon in the Bekaa Valley. They were really our first families, our pilot site. And within a few years, we started receiving organic demand from other settlements in Lebanon for our flooring product. And so we founded Every Shelter in 2018, 2019, because we really wanted to take this thing that was just a student project that turned into a nights and weekends passion project. I had a job full-time much of this time, but we really wanted to start to scale up that solution. And we'd spent so much time with refugees, we knew a lot of the other profound problems that these families experienced, and we wanted to start to tackle those problems. And we wanted to start to reimagine kind of the system that provides shelters to refugees, which ultimately became probably one of the most important aspects of the work that we do is to kind of reimagine this system from, and we can unpack this as much as you want to, from this really kind of global system where there's 3 for-profit companies behind providing provisions to refugees, to actually empowering refugees to create the products that they need to survive. So recentering the value, that economic value, back closer to where the needs are. That allows us to create products that are more responsive to the environment, but it also allows us to create jobs and opportunities for refugees in the creation of the things that they need, which we think is really neat. So yeah, that's a little bit about our journey, but I can unpack any of that.
Fantastic. You were saying that many people have that dream to, revolutionize the situation. So at which point did you realize it's not just a student project, this is actually going to work?
Yeah, it really came down to the families responding positively. We're very data centric as an organization. And so every time we install floors or any of our products, we survey a lot, and we do what's called a baseline and an inline survey. And so before a family even knows they're going to receive floors, we take a data snapshot of what life is like for them. We're looking at some key metrics around health and sleep specifically, because it indicates bigger problems or the potential of solving bigger problems. And then 6 months, a year later, we go back and we conduct the same survey to kind of see what the before and after is. So we have that really kind of data-centric version of feedback. But then anecdotally from families, especially in the wintertime, we just started hearing more and more like, this is actually solving a problem for us. And that was really kind of the hook when I was a student, and then really kind of right after graduating, that really brought me in and said, like, I can't stop. I've got to keep doing this. We saw that there was some value here, and we saw that there was some interest from the refugee families, and yeah, I just couldn't stop. And there've been lots of pitfalls, and this has been really kind of a roller coaster journey for me personally. But even in the kind of the lowest times of launching this, it was really that feedback and that positive affirmation from the families that we worked with that said, hey, look, this is worth trying and this is worth navigating. Even though the system kind of that we were initially in really was failing in some really profound ways. It's what really encouraged us to keep going. So.
And when you were saying that, it was the feedback that it was keeping you going, did you actually interact with these people yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's absolutely essential. I mean, I think when you're endeavoring to design for anybody, take the profession that I'm from, architecture. You design for a client, and that client gives you feedback, and it's a collaborative process of actually arriving at the final design. They're bringing their ideas, they're bringing their problems, and together you're working to solve a problem. It really should be no different if you're trying to design in a humanitarian context. So refugees have to be seen as your customers, your clients, if you're going to be successful at this. And so spending time with the families, spending time now, we're launching a production site for refugee-led organizations in Uganda. So spending time with our producing colleagues. We've got teams in the settlements that are actually effectively our distribution points. They're able to create businesses around the products that the other refugee producers are creating. Spending time with them and building a system that works for everybody, that's equitable for everybody, is absolutely essential. And especially in the design process itself. So yeah, we spend a lot of time in settlements. We spend a lot of time in camps. We WhatsApp a lot. A lot of refugees have WhatsApp. So it's a really kind of a very normal, modern way of communicating with people who are ultimately our customers and our clients and our collaborators and our colleagues. So.
And so are there any particular meetings that you have in your memory?
Yeah, sure. So we're in the process of launching a new product right now in Uganda, and I mentioned it. So 2 years ago, I'll tell two versions of answering that question. 2 years ago, we were in a settlement in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon. At the time, we were still really exclusively focused on flooring, but with a mind for, hey, what's next? What do we want to launch next? Tarps in our world are a big problem. A refugee shelter is often just three things. It's some sort of structure, it has a tarp stretched over it, and then there's a dirt floor. So we started with floors, as we talked about. But the tarps that refugees receive are universal, right? So a refugee in Bangladesh will get the same tarp as a refugee in Lebanon as in Uganda. Even though they're very different settings, on average globally, that TARP that they receive fails within 3 to 6 months. So we really had that on our radar as something that we wanted to address. Well, 2 years ago, we were in a camp in Lebanon, and we saw a family that was using a billboard. So billboard, just imagine, you know what I'm talking about, but in the United States, a typical billboard's about 14 feet by 48 feet, but they're all over the world, right? They're giant, and they're made out of this really tough material. So we saw this family using a billboard instead of a traditional tarp. And it was really striking as a designer to see it, because we saw the prime minister of Lebanon's face upside down and wrapping over the form of the shelter. And to be totally honest, I just wanted to take a picture of it. It was just so visually striking. But the family was home, and they came out, and they obviously were very curious why we're there. And what was really kind of the light bulb moment for us was they had been using that material for over 2 years with no issues. And so one of our newest products, we like to brag that it really wasn't our idea. A family was already using this material. They already had a really great experience with it. And that really was what led us on to the next 18 months of our journey with product development, which was, how do we take this extremely resilient material and build a new product out of it? And how do we do this in a way that enables refugee entrepreneurs to be a part of that process? And so we take this was actually a Pepsi ad. I always have samples close by. This used to be a Pepsi ad, but you can see as a material, it's just really, I don't know how well you can tell. I know some people are listening audio, but some people are seeing this on YouTube, but it's a really, really thick, resilient material. And the problem is that there's an ad on it. And advertisers really want to protect their brand identity, and they don't want it to kind of get loose and be used in uncontrolled ways. And so it was really a design process where we worked with a lot of our producers, with billboard companies, and we said, hey, how do we take this really ample waste stream and turn it into something that's really useful? And so what we landed on, working with our refugee colleagues, looks like this. It's a sewn product, but if the palm of my hand was an advertisement, to hide the advertisement, we effectively sew the advertisement face to face. So we create a double layered tarp, one that we expect to last over 5 years, maybe even more. But really that design process was a process of working with talented seamstresses and tailors in Uganda to land on a product that was viable, that we could replicate, so that we could empower refugee-run organizations to help us create that. And so if you look on our social media feed, there's one woman in particular that we work really closely with. Her name is Noella Kabale. She runs an organization that she created herself called Real Uganda. And so it's really kind of our prerogative to find organizations like Noella's organization, like Real, and say, hey, look, we want you to produce this product for us. We want you to grow your impact as a producer, employ more people producing a product that is ultimately going to be consumed in Uganda by other refugees. So that was probably a pretty long-winded answer to that.
No, it's all great. But I was wondering, then in that journey, when did you first actually hear about blockchain technology?
So it's funny, coming from an architecture background, I just have a lot of friends that are in design. My board has a lot of people in the art world on it. And a really good friend of mine who historically has been a sculptor actually contacted us, I think it was probably in April or May, and he was doing a drop on an NFT platform, and he was going to donate 40% of his proceeds to us. And that was really our introduction to NFTs, was really being, as a nonprofit, a recipient of a friend of mine who is a talented artist's generosity. And since then, we've collaborated with a number of other artists. We've really benefited from their work and their generosity towards us. And we've just attempted to make a deep dive into this world and participate, not just as recipients, but our desire is, especially next year, to maybe start engaging by releasing our own NFTs and really diving into this world, because it's extremely interesting. And it's a brand new form of philanthropy that really is there's just not a lot of precedent for it. So
when you say releasing your own NFT, so what do you mean by that?
we've been trying for a while to decide, what would be interesting and worthy. I don't want to share too much because it's still in development. But the project, kind of in a nutshell, in kind of broad terms, is we're looking for artists who want to effectively donate a drop. We work a lot with generative artists. A lot of our friends are generative artists in this space. And so we're actually recruiting artists who want to effectively donate an NFT that will embed as a part of the NFT that we'll release. And so I'll share, I guess, a little bit more. We've created a rendering animation of one of our shelters that's using a billboard tarp that we produce. And so if you think about replacing the roof tarp, so that's often the way that tarps are used, is it's your walls, it's your roof. But the idea as it is right now, and we'll see how it evolves, is to effectively take that roof tarp and replace it with the image of, from one of the NFT donors. So we'll see how it works. It may evolve by the time we release it, but we're really in the process of recruiting artists that think this is a neat way, clever, creative way of fundraising with us. So,
is there a particular profile of artists that you're looking for?
Not yet. We have a few that we're really close with that are kind of our initial donors, and stills work a little bit better. Obviously, the graphic is actually going to be animated. It's going to revolve around one of our shelters. So a still image works a little bit better. But we're really kind of growing this concept right now, and we want to do it collaboratively with the artists that want to participate. So.
And I guess the other way that the artist can work with you is via doing good platform. I believe you sign up with them.
Yeah.
So how did it come about this collaboration?
Kind of in our deep dive into this world, Doing Good's name just kept coming up. It hadn't been released. I think the first time I talked to anybody at Doing Good was, it was August. So however many months ago that was. And, it was really clear that Doing Good was going to be this really kind of incredible, neat opportunity for us to be a part of a brand new community that was really focused on philanthropy, really kind of baking, sorry, I'm not trying to make a pun. I am a dad, so I make a lot of puns, baking Doing Good into, the model behind the platform. And that was obviously really, really interesting to us. It's just such an exciting space. I mean, it's just growing so rapidly. And the philanthropy side of it is just so intriguing to see an organization bake that in from day one. We knew we wanted to be a part of it. So
do you think it is generally the way that most other organization like yours should go for, like NFT fundraising this way?
I don't know if it's for everyone or not. I hope that it grows that way. I think there's a lot of opportunities for nonprofits to engage, not just passively, but actively. And that's really what we're starting to explore as an organization. And I think there's some really interesting examples out there. I know that today, actually, the day that we're recording this is y'all's launch day. And so I'm so interested to see how other nonprofits are starting to engage really kind of actively in this space. I think that it definitely benefits other nonprofits to start understanding this space because it's brand new. But it's my understanding that already hundreds of millions of dollars have been generated and donated to nonprofits through the NFT space, even this early kind of in the kind of consciousness, the societal like zeitgeist around this. It's really, I don't know, there's nothing like it, right? I don't know that there's been an industry that's this young that has already been so charitably focused. Not in my experience. And obviously we're a really young organization ourselves, but we really do see a really incredible, really encouraging future in the metaverse for charity. It's really encouraging to see that so early on in its existence that it's already such a big priority.
Absolutely. And can you think of any other case studies in that field, any other nonprofits using NFTs in an inspiring way?
Yeah, I'm meeting with another organization that's a local chamber orchestra. and they're attempting to release a specific NFT in the music side of the space. And so a lot of the organizations I'll say that I know, they're really kind of in this ideation phase like we are. We've seen plenty of examples like us where we've been beneficiaries, where we've been an artist has selected our organization or another really incredible organization to be the beneficiary of a series or a sale. So we've seen lots of that. And I think we're really kind of starting to see the early days of organizations actively saying, hey, we want to release our own. We want to engage kind of at that next level in this space. And so, yeah, I don't know that I have a lot of really great examples of that because I think it's so nascent, but that is one of the things that I'm excited to see on y'all's side as well.
As you were saying, this is a great opportunity. I was wondering, what do you exactly mean by that? In a couple of years' time, where would you like this space to be?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I'm so focused on kind of our next steps, but I can see, I guess let me zoom out a little bit. The blockchain is permeating kind of the humanitarian space in really, really interesting ways. And so I think I can zoom out and then maybe zoom back into a future in the NFT space specifically. But we're already seeing really interesting examples of cash transfers that are happening. I can unpack cash transfers a little bit, but there's a lot of organizations that see it as a really impactful way of really making meaningful differences in lives by effectively just taking all the strings off and saying, hey, here is money. You know what's best for your life, and go do it. Maybe that's a new roof. Maybe that's sending your kid to university. Maybe that's medicine, right? Maybe that's starting a new business. And so we're already seeing a lot of like really interesting things happening in the blockchain with cash transfers. For us, just because of our own personal ties, it's not really Every Shelter's mission, but I guess maybe let's say a personal submission of my own is one of the things that we say at Every Shelter all the time is talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. So we're very focused on livelihoods, on employment opportunities, on shelter, but there are so many creative refugees that we've seen that we are attempting to connect directly to the NFT artist space, right? So sometimes connectivity is an issue, but we're working in one specific settlement in Uganda with a series of artists who we would like to connect directly to being NFT producers themselves. And so we're going to run an experiment next year. We've got 4 artists that we're working with in that settlement. And this is really, like I said, a little bit of a personal project along with some of the artists that have donated to us already. But we want to help those artists link in directly to this world. If you think about how disconnected they are physically to many of us, getting to the Nakivale refugee settlement in Uganda is difficult. And a lot of these artists are painters, they're sculptors. And so if somebody wanted to make a physical purchase of one of their pieces, there's a lot of logistics there that are really tough, right? But if we can get them connected to the internet and producing digital art form, all those barriers go away. And I think it's a really interesting opportunity for maybe physically disconnected artists to find opportunities for their art and their creativity in a new way. So that's something that we're taking on, or I'll say I'm taking on with the number of our NFT donors, is just to say, hey, can we create a linkage here? Can we fill in whatever kind of missing gaps there from like a knowledge or technology standpoint to directly link these refugee artists with this amazing new community. So maybe that's a little bit of a zoomed in answer.
No, that's great. So where will we be able to see this art by these people?
Great question. Maybe there's a way to do it through doing good. That's really kind of one of the next steps is we've been working with them to kind of cultivate which pieces we want to launch with them, and we've got a few options. And so we really want to find the most successful way of helping them navigate that process, even though we're kind of holding hands just really at the beginning, but we hope to be able to step away. I mean, that's really kind of a vision that we see that I think the NFT and the blockchain space provides in general, is the more Western organizations can kind of just get it out of the way, probably the more successful this is going to be, because talent is really everywhere. I mean, people really are creative. They're hardworking. They're amazing. and sometimes it's just, like in our organization, sometimes it's just setting up that opportunity and then taking a step back. And I think the same is true for the blockchain, for NFT artists that are refugees. Maybe there's a role for us to kind of get them introduced. But then I really do believe that very quickly you'll be able to take a step back and just see an unbelievable creative output from these people who really just needed that opportunity to connect.
Absolutely. And I suppose this is answering the question of, so many people are scared whether the NFT technology is going to reinforce the old structures where, there is certain kind of people or platforms which are just gatekeepers, and then there is no chance for other people to be seen. But maybe thanks to the project like yours, it will fulfill what it's promising to do.
And I think that's a good fear for people to have. But let me speak to that specifically. So before I was able to be full-time running every shelter, I worked for a design company that worked specifically with artists doing public art projects. So think multi-million, multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars, pretty complex fabrication, art projects. So these would be at museums or libraries or airports, for example. I saw really closely with a lot of our artist clients how many middle people were involved for their art to actually live, and how many people profited from their art or acted as gatekeepers to their art, right? So when we started learning more and more about NFTs and seeing a lot of our friends who are artists being successful, being really kind of the captains of their own, artist ship, I guess. Sorry, that's not a great analogy, but being able to be in more full control over their art direction, it was really exciting because, we care a lot about a lot of these artists, especially me. A lot of them are really close friends. Some of them are on my board. To see that was just so exciting and encouraging. And obviously the way that my brain went, just because of the work that I do, it's like, man, what barriers can we actually get rid of? Because a lot of the problems that we see in our space are really well-meaning middle people, right? And sometimes that's necessary, right? But I think increasingly we live in a world that really understands that making those direct linkages so that people can benefit themselves and be empowered themselves, that's really the smarter long-term vision. And so, those linkages that we saw, those kind of direct connections that we saw for artists, they're there for the global poor, right? They're there for refugees who, are really, they're victims only in the sense that there's cruel circumstances surrounding where they are. They didn't want to leave their homes. They didn't want to flee, right? They didn't really have a choice. And so making these opportunities and finding opportunities, especially in the NFT space for them, really aligns well with our belief system in general. So.
That's fantastic. That's great. But when it comes to the opportunities, when it comes to the nonprofit organizations which this technology is presenting, what is your opinion?
Yeah, so in our world, there's some really cold language that gets used, right? In the nonprofit world, you refer to the group that you're serving as your beneficiary. We try to not do that. We try to think of them as our customers and our colleagues and our, but beneficiary has this, kind of patronizing tone to it. This is true across almost any version of a nonprofit, regardless of who you serve. Maybe that's domestically, providing food for hungry. Maybe that's, a women's shelter, and a foster care. Every nonprofit has a beneficiary. And I don't know how this translates in every sector because I only really know my own. But if nonprofits start seeing themselves really as kind of a channel and their beneficiary, not as a beneficiary, but as a customer and a client, I think it starts to help kind of translate what this new world has as a way of channeling benefit and directly connecting their beneficiary to benefits. Because I do believe that the world is extremely generous. I do think that this is just a new way of giving in some ways, but it's a really, really interesting and exciting one. And I think that every nonprofit can kind of take their lens and see themselves as a channel to get their beneficiary, their customers, their clients actually more directly empowered and connected. So.
And do you see going forward that there should be some kind of organizations created which will kind of introduce standards when it comes to the, this particular industry and when it comes to the blockchain technology and NFTs?
Yeah, so the nonprofit world in general is a very conservative one. And there's reasons for that. We're very responsible. We are ultimately legally and fiduciarily responsible for our donors. We have an obligation to fulfill the generosity in the direction that the folks who are ultimately donating and funding this work, we have a responsibility towards them. And there's a lot of very traditional structures in place to make sure that responsibility is upheld. And so there's IRS standards, board legal standards that every nonprofit has to go through. Those very conservative structures that are there necessarily make it really difficult for a lot of nonprofits to participate in the crypto space as it is right now. And so I think that some of those standards, some of those structures really will actually serve to facilitate, not necessarily to be, not to be a middle person, not to necessarily be, erecting kind of an old institution necessarily, but some guardrails, some best practices, standards, as those develop and evolve, I think it'll really just kind of help usher in more nonprofits to participate in this space. Because ultimately a nonprofit can only do what its board allows it to, and so there is an education component. I mean, there was from my own board. I remember when I went to my board and it said, hey, we want to create a crypto account. We want a MetaMask wallet and, Coinbase and, all of these things. A lot of my board members' heads were really spinning because ours were too, and so it took a process of kind of walking through with our own board to say, hey, look, this isn't scary. This is exciting. Let's talk openly about how we can do this in a transparent way so that everybody feels comfortable. And a lot of that was working with our accounting firm and our bookkeeper to make sure that everybody felt comfortable with the way that this happens and the way that we engage in this space. And so that we can preserve a high level of transparency, that people who donate to us can feel really confident that we're doing what we say we're doing, that the money that they donate is actually going towards our mission. And so that's ultimately really exciting, and but it's new territory for a lot of nonprofits. So I do see a lot of benefit in some of these things emerging, and we are definitely interested in participating and sharing. And I do all the time. I meet with a lot of nonprofits and I say, here's what we did. Here's what made our accountants and our board feel comfortable. Because I really do think that that's a part of our role in this is introducing even more incredible charities to this world and getting them comfortable, getting their boards comfortable in it as well. So.
And as this is quite a conservative space, as you're saying, if you had all the power needed, how would you revolutionize this space?
Oh my goodness. Well, that's such a big question. How would I revolutionize nonprofits' engagement in the NFT space?
Yeah, and the regulation, you were saying that basically it's quite difficult because legally and so on, sometimes quite restricting when it comes to adopting all these new technologies and opportunities.
I don't know that I have to even revolutionize it, because I think it's going to happen, right? Maybe that's not a really great way to answer the question. It's going to come, and I think, it's kind of like anytime a great technology is introduced, the creators don't really fully understand the maximum potential of that technology, and I don't want to get too, meta techno futurist about that. But I think often when a really powerful technology is introduced, the creators can't possibly anticipate all the amazing and negative ways that it'll be harnessed. So I guess what I would say is there's so much potential energy already here. There's already such incredible results here that it's going to be its kind of own gravitational force for nonprofits getting involved in this. And I think we'll start to see organically a lot of these things that are going to help facilitate more nonprofits engaging this. I think we'll start to see them emerge. And like I said, we're trying to actively participate in that and share what we've learned. So that's not a really great question, or it was a great question. Sorry. Not a great answer to your great question. I just really think that it's going to happen because there's too much potential that's already been demonstrated. I'll stop there.
That's great. That's really positive. I just wondered, because obviously there is some kind of legal stuff that needs to be changed, right? Do you think it's possible to convince the big guys up there to change their thinking?
Yeah, so let me get really specific if it's helpful. Right now, the IRS and the United States, so we're a 501c3, which is a technical designation for a corporation that has charitable intentions and status and can prove that. And there's certain legal requirements that we have for reporting our income, how it's spent, even salaries and major expenses, right? So there's kind of the structure built up. The way that the IRS sees a lot of contributions in crypto, so if somebody donated crypto directly to every shelter, as Ethereum, as Bitcoin, as whatever your choice is, right now the IRS sees that as the same transaction as a stock. So doesn't see it as a currency. It sees it as a stock. So it's as if someone donated Apple stock to every shelter. And so they're attempting to see. They're attempting to kind of frame this new world through an existing one that already has rules around it. So you see that kind of butt up in really weird ways with a nonprofit that maybe wants to maintain some of that Ethereum as Ethereum, right? And not completely convert it to cash. So a lot of the restrictions that we see around nonprofits, including us, is that there is an expectation kind of implicitly that you take that Ethereum and immediately convert it to US dollars. Yeah. And there are organizations that have started up that do that, that effectively operate, I don't want to say a black box in a negative way, but Ethereum or Bitcoin, whatever comes in, US dollars comes out to the nonprofit's bank account. I don't see that as a permanent thing. I think at some point the IRS, the tax code here and in other places will catch up so that it's possible for organizations to maintain currency as crypto and not immediately convert it. Right now the IRS sees that as basically speculative. Mm-hmm. So if I was to, and you can, right? But it brings you into new territory that could be really difficult, especially for a small nonprofit to navigate. Because all of a sudden and the IRS's views are being speculative with an investment, and not anything else besides that. And so it makes it really difficult, scary for an organization to maintain any level of crypto as its initial form. I think that'll change. And one of the reasons why that's beneficial is because of kind of the liquidity and the fluidity that crypto can take place. We have staff in other countries. We pay a lot of fees to banks to pay them. We see a lot of benefit in the future from our own kind of financial standpoint and being able to do that a little bit more fluidly. But right now, that's not really where we are, right? It's a conservative space and we have to make sure that we're not accidentally getting into trouble. And so that's one maybe tangible example of how we'd like to see this evolve and some of the rules to be better defined so that our board, many other boards, the IRS can basically give us really clear direction. This is exactly how you do.
And obviously you registered in US, but can you think of any other countries where the legislation is perhaps more friendly and it could act as a blueprint?
Yeah, kind of, right? I've been following, El Salvador a little bit closely, and it seems like nation states recognizing, adopting crypto is a way that starts to then meld into their tax codes. And so I probably couldn't speak very fluently to other tax codes, but seeing that level of adoption from a nation state means that necessarily new rules or new guidelines are going to need to be produced so that citizens can then adhere to the tax code, presented by their country. So yeah, that's probably the closest I could get.
Yeah, well, it seems like you're very busy because every shelter is doing so many things and you're very active in that space. I was wondering, how do you see your role going forward? What's your ambition?
Yeah, one way to say it is just we want to make that transition as an organization from a few for-profit corporations making all of the goods that Refugee receive, and right now they're very low quality goods. We want to see 10,000 refugee-led organizations, that are actually responsible for creating those products, to evolving those products to be responsive to their customers, which are other refugees, we want to really see that power shift and that economic benefit shift, and we want to be a conduit for that. And so for me, a lot of my role, as it turns out, is to effectively be kind of the evangelist for our vision. So opportunities like this to share with your audience is really important for us. Right now, I'm still one of the only technical people on our team. We're a team of 5, almost 6. We are growing, but I do spend a lot of my time working directly on the design and the refinement of our ideas and products. And so, as we grow, we'll be able to start to, bring in new talented people to start to fulfill some of those roles. Right now, we're a dozen hats. It'd be great if I was just wearing 10, so that we could actually really refine and grow stronger in some of the things that we want to do. So.
And in terms of promotion of this concept and the marketing, do you think that something is changing out there? Just the fact, that the artists are keen to collaborate with institutions like you, does it mean that the audiences are changing?
Yeah, I think so. It's a completely different audience. Many of the artists that have donated to us, I'll throw out some more terminology that's common in the nonprofit world. So a major donor is typically someone who donates more than $5,000. Well, we've already been working with a number of artists who have far and away surpassed that. We've had donations of $90,000, $45,000, $20,000. A lot of these people are, it's the first time in their life that they're really, in our world, considered a major donor. It's a whole new world in that way. The demographics around the crypto community is growing and evolving and changing. But for a lot of people, it's the first time in their life that they're really considering themselves to be philanthropic in the sense of, hey, I want to have a strategy behind what I'm doing. I am really passionate about this cause. Maybe it's environmental, maybe it's refugees, who knows what it is, but I really want to be strategic about that giving. And I think there is room in that space to kind of help educate that dialogue, because you're not giving $20 a lot of times. A lot of times, many of the artists that we've worked with are giving really meaningful amounts of money. For us, I mean, some of the biggest gifts that we'll get this year came from NFT artists. And I think there's room for more dialogue around that, how to be intentional, how to strategize around, hey, here are what my philanthropic goals are. And these are the types of organizations that I want to empower. Just as a specific example, there may be specific projects that an artist is passionate about. And they want to be directly involved with what that looks like. For our organization, because we're design oriented, that's a real possibility for a creative to get involved in what we do. So yeah, it's exciting, and it just opens up a brand new, larger audience in general to a collaboration between a nonprofit and an artist. And that's kind of an effect of the internet in general, that broader audience. But we can more fluidly conceptualize, ideate, and execute a creative idea together. And I think that's really interesting. And I think we're just at the very, very beginning of what that could look like. We're trying to do it with the NFT that we hope to launch next quarter. We're directly embedding, the art being produced in a creative way. But, I think 10 years from now, we may sigh at some of these early attempts at being creative and collaborative. I think we don't even understand what it could fully be. So but you got to start, you got to try, you got to start collaborating and exploring. So.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the project where you promote and empower the actual refugees to produce their own art NFTs, do you have a plan for marketing of that side of the project?
I would take feedback from anybody on that. Because, marketing in this world is very different. I think anybody that's in this community knows that their personal Instagram DMs are blown up with everybody who's releasing this project or that.
You say this community, you mean by NFT community, or you mean the nonprofit organizations community?
The NFT community, right? There's a lot of noise, and it's hard to cut through that noise. And so marketing is a really interesting question in general. I think being a part of a really respected, incredible, visionary platform is a big part of kind of cutting through that noise. I think, being a part of a platform that really is very intentional about their own mission and beliefs. I think that helps. And so for us, part of that marketing and trying to ideate around, like, how do we release this? How do we make this connection successfully and actually paint a roadmap for maybe other refugee artists, is choosing that right platform, you know, because that ultimately is a big part of how they can be seen and you know, amidst the millions of NFTs that are being released, you know, actually showcasing their unique talents and this unique opportunity for them. So I would not say that we are in any way an expert. For us, participating, creating our own NFTs is a part of that journey of understanding how do you do this effectively. And that is something that we also obviously want to translate for that kind of side project that we're conducting. So.
Well, obviously you're on a good way to do that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And now we are slowly coming to the end of our conversation, but I was wondering if you'll be happy to share one interesting fact about yourself that online community is not aware, something odd.
Yeah, you know, I don't know how common it is. I really love, I'll just share something that happened a few weeks ago. I just got back from Uganda right before Thanksgiving in the US. And I like to play disc golf a lot. I like to slackline. You know, one of the organizations that we're partnered with has actually created a disc golf course right next to Lake Victoria. So this lake that in geography in our childhood, all of us learned about Lake Victoria. It's one of the biggest lakes in the world. But they've actually created a disc golf course out of tires. So like if you imagine a tire, the high wall is the basket, the top is like really the top. And then the chains, instead of chains, they had garden hose that acted as the chains that you throw the disc golf towards. So a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to actually play on Lake Victoria on this kind of improvised disc golf course. And it was probably one of my favorite side activities. I had a day, it was a Sunday, had some downtime, and playing that kind of rudimentary disc golf course on Lake Victoria in Uganda was a huge highlight. So,
oh God, sounds blissful.
Oh, it was so neat. You know, on one side we saw traditional fishermen casting nets. On the other side, there were women yam farming. So it was kind of a really kind of surreal, visceral way to spend an afternoon.
So you were in Uganda just 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. So we actually have staff there. We were there actually looking for a property for this production hub. We were working with a lot of our producing partners, meeting with them, designing the system, the way that this will work with them, meeting with some of our distribution partners in the settlements. So really just getting a lot of face time and collaboratively trying to build this new system together. So yeah, I was there for a good chunk of November. So
fantastic. It's great to actually get to go into places and, as you were mentioning before, to interact with the people that you're building for.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that's done by our local staff. You know, it's kind of a unique opportunity for me to get to go and obviously participate as well. You know, COVID has made a lot of that pretty challenging. So we're always really thankful for digital tools that work even in refugee settlements and remote parts of Uganda. So, you know, we've done the best we can with virtual tools and really thankful that a lot of those things have kind of expanded and opened up to us because it's made this collaboration process more fluid. But ultimately, nothing beats FaceTime. And that's one of the reasons why we have staff local, so that it doesn't rely on me showing up every once in a while. But, you know, our team can actually interact on a daily basis. So.
Absolutely. Scott, is there anything else you would like to talk about? I'll say.
No, you know, I'm so excited to see, you know, what this collaboration between Every Shelter and Doing Good will look like. You know, it's early days for y'all, but we're just so excited for y'all's launch today, and to see, you know, what comes. I know it's going to be great.
Fantastic. We are very excited about your project because it really sounds fascinating. Is you're really working on some great stuff, and I'm so happy to hear about this project, also about empowering refugees to become creators, and hopefully we'll see this works of art on the platform too. But for the moment, thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking to you.
Of course.
Everybody. Yes, for everybody tuning in, thank you so much for listening, and tune in next week, same time, same hour. And thank you so much, Scott.
Absolutely, Ania. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.